Singha Premium Lager.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. This is Singha Premium Lager from Bangkok in Thailand. And I know I joke about Bangkok, but it's a bit rude, so I won't say it. Anyway, this is the original premium beer from Thailand. Now, there's a reason I'm reviewing this, and well, there's a couple of reasons. And first reason being, someone was talking about this beer the other day, and they said that, oh, it's a Thai beer, and me, having my usual misconceptions, was thinking in my head, yeah, I bet it's full of rice, really watery, and not good. However, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to do a little bit of research, and I was pleasantly surprised. Firstly, this is not brewed under license in the UK. This is actually brewed in Thailand, and it's imported by Shepherd Neame, local brewer from down the road. And it says imported on the bottle, so I've got to take that as being gospel. Now, whether Shepherd Neame have done a sneaky, and I'm not telling people they're brewing it under license, it certainly doesn't say it on here. This was filled on the 7th of the 22nd. 22nd of the 7th. That's best before. That's the best before. 7th, 22nd of this month. So it's not too fresh. It's saying it's a product of Thailand. So, and it says imported, brewed in Thailand, imported premium beer. So I can only say, and from my research as well, it's only brewed in Thailand and it's exported from around the world, 50 different countries no less, from Thailand. Now, the history of this is quite interesting. This brewery sort of dates from around 1933. In 1929, Thailand wasn't called Thailand, it was called Siam. And if you've ever seen the film The King and I, that's based in what is now Thailand. But the beer that was being drunk at the time in the late 20s and early 30s, it was all imported stuff. And the Thai, or the Siamese royal family and the Siamese economy was suffering because the exchange rate there was such a big difference between the value of the Thai baht back then and other foreign currencies. So one of the locals, or a local businessman, decided that he was going to brew a local beer which would cut down on the amount of money being spent on importing beer. So what he did, him and a couple of his mates went over to Europe. They inspected a lot of breweries, which is sort of common amongst fledgling breweries in certain countries. That's what they do. They went over to Europe, mainly Germany, England in many cases, Czech Republic, Belgium in some cases as well. The best brewing beer countries in the world, in my opinion. That's where they've gone. They've looked at how the process works. They've looked at the ingredients and the techniques, etc. And they've gone back to Thailand in this case, or Siam as it was called back then, and they started brewing beer. And this stuff didn't get brewed until 1939. And it doesn't mention on the website, and I believe there's a reason for that. But as you may or may not know, Thailand, or Siam as it was called back then, was invaded by the Japanese during World War II. So I imagine that had an effect on the brewery. If you look at the website, from the timeline goes from 1933 to 1955, conveniently missing out the war years. The reason I think they don't mention it is because I imagine this beer is sold in Japan and they don't want to upset the Japanese by saying, yeah, these bastards were fucking ruining our country. But there you go. That's just me. Don't mention the war. Mention it once. Think I got away with it, as Basil Fawlty would say. Anyway, yeah, as I say, it's brewed in Thailand. So again, why has this piqued my interest? Well, the fact that they don't use rice in this beer, they use imported German Saaz hops. Apparently there's 3 different types of hops, but they only mention one, saying it's imported German Saaz hops, and they use 100% malt. Now, they use 100% malt, or they make it known that they brew their beer with 100% malt, and you probably think, well, what's the fucking big deal about that? Well, for a Far East country to do that, that is a big thing, because guaranteed, most of them, a couple of exceptions, that being one of them, you will find rice in beer from the Far East, because rice obviously grows in abundance. Rice is the equivalent to Europe's malt. It's the basis of their diet, their source of complex carbohydrates, whereas ours is malt for bread, etc. If you're, yeah, well, I suppose in Italy as well, you're using durum wheat, so effectively malt or wheat is what we use. But this company have used malt, which is no mean feat, because that must be a little bit expensive. But it's quite widely available, so it must be popular. Now, the only place I've seen this before is in Thai restaurants, and I don't think I've had this before. I certainly don't remember it, put it that way. But there you go, there's a little bit of a history. Yeah, it does say established 1933 on there. By the way, that sign there is the stamp of approval from the Thai royal family. Now, if any of you have ever been to Thailand, I haven't. I don't like the heat, so I haven't gone to Thailand, but I've got a few mates that have. The royal family is held in really high esteem there. And I've heard that the king's into heavy metal and he plays guitar. Fucking rock on, my friend. But as I say, the royal family are held in very high esteem, and if you insult the royal family, that means you go to prison. And believe me, Thai prisons, from what I've read, are not very good. There's a book out called The Damage Done. It's by an Australian fella who got done for drug smuggling, and he basically narrates his time in prison in Thailand. Not a very fucking pleasant experience, believe me. I won't spoil it for you, but it's a book worth reading. Very harrowing as well. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but I found it fascinating. But yeah, it's worth reading. The Damage Done. Check it out on Amazon. This stuff, getting back to the beer, is a lager, and of course lager is the most popular style in these hot countries because it is light and it is refreshing. Now, just a quick word about the name. That is pronounced Sing, not Singha, as everyone over here pronounce it. Apparently it's pronounced Sing, and that makes a lot of sense because in Indian, I think the name Singh means lion as well. I know a lot of Sikhs, their surnames are Singh, and I think it translates to lion in, what would that be, Punjabi. So they share the same name for lions, apparently, and of course the lion is a symbol of power in the Far East, and of course it's been adopted by many countries, no less than Scotland and England as well. But there you go. So let's stop waffling and let's get on to this beer. Right, this is a 650ml bottle and it's 5%. Brewed in Thailand under the supervision of the Singha Corporation. So it's brewed by Pathanam. Oh, sorry, I should have made clear what the brewery was. The brewery that brew this is called the Boon Brewery. I think that's how it's pronounced. Probably wrong, but that's the name of the brewery. But it's saying here that this is brewed under the. This is brewed by the Pathanam or something. I can't read it. My fucking eyes are fucking losing the plot here. But it's brewed under the supervision of the Singha Corporation Company Limited, imported by Shepherd Neame, Faversham, Kent. ME13 7AX. ME, of course, I think it stands for Medway. UK Trade Company, blah blah blah, fuck off. Ingredients: water, barley malt, glucose syrup, all you bastards, and hops. So we have not quite got away from the dodginess. Now, the glucose syrup that's in here, that is an alarm bell. But I can possibly see why. Because if you eat Thai food, then you know that it's very, very spicy, very savoury. So you need a little bit of sweetness. And I imagine that's why this is so popular for Thai restaurants. A bit like Cobra, if you know what I mean. So, with all that in mind, let's stop waffling. Let's get this tasted. Right, today has been a massive pile of bollocky dog wank because I have had 4 sink jobs. The worst one being the Kamenitsa. That was a Bulgarian beer which tasted like a fucking a skunked bag lady's period. I had the Varka beer from Poland, which was not good. Very, very mediocre. And I also had the Ursus Premium, which got a 1 out of 10 and went down the sink because it was fucking shite. So, can we make this number 4 going down the sink? Oh, look at that, you twat. What have you done? You fucking idiot. Yeah, well, let's fuck that then. I'm hoping this isn't going to be as bad because 4 beers on the trot down the sink has to be a first. But I have to say that last one, that Kamenitsa, is probably the worst beer, certainly the worst beer of 2022. I think it was 3 mouthfuls of that before I knew after the first mouthful. I knew when I opened the bottle. I knew before I even opened the bottle it was going to be shit. I just didn't realise how shit. And that was fucking shit. That got a 0 out of 10. What are we getting out of this? Not a fucking great deal. Are we getting anything out of the bottle? Nish. Well, at least it's in a fucking brown bottle. And I suppose being in Thailand, which is very, very fucking sunny, you would have to put it in a brown bottle because if you didn't, you'd end up with shit like that Kamenitsa. But look what I've done. That's a really frothy head on that. All that remains now is to give it a taste. Bottoms up. Oh Christ, that is sweet. Yeah, the glucose syrup on this, I can get it. I can get it in the flavour, but it's not as obtrusive as some of the glucose syrup that you do get in these macro brewed beers. Now, I know that the Cobra is just full of it, and it works if you're eating an Indian and beer isn't the main concentration on your mind, or on your palate I should say. This is slightly more agreeable. I do get it on there, yes, there is some of that glucose syrup type sweetness, but it's not as big as say the Cobra or other macro brewed beers that you get over here. There's a little bit of malt character on there, I will say. The hops that they're talking about, the Sarts hops, yeah, you're not really shining through there. And if it's true that they do import them hops from Germany, they're going to be really expensive, and I imagine they're going to use them sparingly. And if this is available in 50 countries, how many fucking hops, or how much tonnage of hops must they be importing? It's just about agreeable for me. Doesn't really have any nasties in it. The glucose syrup, I think they've more or less got spot on with it. I think if it was any more, then this would be down the sink. It's just, I wouldn't say it's the perfect balance, because I don't agree with putting glucose syrup in lagers. Brewing syrup or glucose syrup is used in things like Belgian blondes, and it does have a place in there. Duvel get it spot on. They do it quite well actually, and I think when you're doing it in lagers, though, I think you're I don't know, you're covering up a multitude of sins, and I can sort of half forgive Singha for doing this because obviously they're in Thailand. Thailand doesn't have a great beer brewing tradition, and I imagine the sweetness that you can get from the malts over here, they can't get from the malt that they're using. So I think when you reduce the grain bill in your mash, then brewing syrup makes up for that, the sugars and the starches that come out from the malt and what the yeast feed on, and I think that's why they've put that in there. And it also flavours the beer, it gives it a sweetness. Some of it, sometimes it just goes way over the top. They're macro brewers, certainly what's name, the lot that brew the Holston Pils over here, that's just full of fucking brewing syrup. And Green King, they put it in their beers as well, and fucking hell, it just ruins it. They put it in every single beer and it doesn't taste nice. This, it's just about acceptable for me. Other people may like this. I imagine if you're eating something, this would be quite nice in a Thai restaurant. It's a reasonable palate cleanser, I should say. Not nasty. Doesn't really have a character, and it would be perfect for warm weather when you drink this ice cold, because it's just going to be refreshing. You're not going to be worried about the flavour. And as I say, if you're in a restaurant, Thai food, if you've ever had it, it's very fragrant, it's spicy, it's very savoury, and it is packed full of flavour. So you don't really want to really flavour some beer as well. You want something that's going to be a palate cleanser, and this sort of fits the bill. Kudos to them if they do import German Sarts hops, but that's not really coming through in this beer. I can't really get any of that hop character at all. It's just mainly malt. There's a little bitterness on there, but that could be anything. It could be any hop extract. It could be, I don't know, any type of generic hop. It doesn't really scream Sarts to me. Certainly not a German grown Sarts hop. But I'll say this is just okay. It's just passable. Not a chuck down a sink job, thankfully. Will I ever buy it again? If I'm in a Thai restaurant and it's a choice between Heineken and that, I'm going to go for this, because this has got a little bit more to it. And yeah, if you're going to eat Thai, you might as well drink Thai as well, eh? But there you go. I haven't been in a Thai restaurant in ages. I should do, really. I do like the that sticky rice they do. And what's the other? The Thai green curry. I used to love that. I went for a phase of eating that. Hotter the better. Really nice. I've made it over here, and the mixes that you get from the supermarket, they're just full of coconut milk, and they just have a nasty taste to them. But yeah, I do like my Thai food. It's quite nice. Not as good as Turkish, but not bad. As for the beer, I'm just going to say it's okay. Doesn't bowl me over. Doesn't really scream of having much character, but it serves a purpose. So if you go to Thailand and this is available, get this. I imagine if it's ice cold or on tap, it's going to be really refreshing in that heat that they've got over there. And if you're in a Thai restaurant, it's going to be a good palate cleanser for them really big Thai food flavours. So yeah, I see it does serve a purpose, and that's why it's not a chuck down a sink job. So what is the verdict on Singha Premium Lager? Yeah, okay-ish, but not a standout beer. It's just one of them generic beers that is okay if you just want a beer. I wouldn't buy this for its flavour. I wouldn't buy it for its character, because there isn't really much. But it isn't unpleasant, and that's the main thing. And now, after having them 3 fucking disgusting beers that all went down the sink, I'm not gonna, how can I say, I'm not going to put it in the same category as that, but it's one of them beers that it's just inoffensive. It doesn't do anything wrong. It's just for a time and a place, i.e. if you're in Thailand on a really fucking hot day, or you're in a Thai restaurant and you want an half decent beer that isn't fucking Heineken, which seems to be the standard in a lot of Indian restaurants now. They've got Heineken in there. I fucking despair, I really do. But there you go, that's just me. Anyway, what mark will I give it? Well, what sort of mark will I give it? I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. And the reason I give it a 5 out of 10, in my fucked up marking system, 5 is just about acceptable. And that's what this is. And there's no nasties in it. This is what it's got going for it. There's no nasties. It's not a chuck down a sink job. And it does serve a purpose on a hot day, or if you're in a Thai restaurant. But when you start getting into the categories of 6, that's when I want to see a little bit of character on a beer. I want to see a little bit of a care gone into beer, and I want to see beer that makes me want to buy it again. I would only buy this under special circumstances, i.e. the 2 that I've mentioned. Well, I'm never going to go to Thailand. That's a fucking given. That is just way too hot. I went to Bristol the other day and I burnt my head. So if you think I'm going to Thailand, you are very much fucking mistaken, my friend. But if I'm in a Thai restaurant, I may order this. If it's a toss-up between this and Heineken, I'll see what beers they've got. Usually they're just the macro brewed fare, but if they've got something special, I'll have that. Anyway, 5 out of 10. Recommended if you like an inoffensive beer, if you're going to a Thai restaurant, or if you're going to Thailand. And remember, beer is working class champagne.